Good afternoon, Niner faithful. Welcome to another live episode here. I am your host, Rob Schuh. Today I am joined once again by one of my very favorite guests to have on the show here, Jack Hammer, who is a reporter for the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Jack, are you enjoying your bye-week reprieve so far?
It's been good. It's been good to kind of get a little bit of a break, kind of get the batteries recharged and ready to go for the next 12-week sprint that we have here.
That's key. You have to get the batteries recharged. I'm guessing, though, that with the fervor going on in Niner Nation, that you weren't able to get as much time away as you may have expected headed into the bye. I don't know if anyone predicted that we'd be at chaos mode in the bye week 5 yet, but here we are nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I tried to get away as much as I could. I didn't really watch any of the games yesterday. I watched about 15 minutes. The end of the Seattle game was about all I got to watch yesterday. I watched a little, and also a little bit of the games that was on from England in the morning. But other than that, I tried to get away from it as much as I could. And yeah, but you can't really do that with the 49ers, like you said, because there's always something going on, and it's just constant quarterback chaos and beyond that with this team right now.
It really is constant quarterback chaos. I couldn't think of any better way to put that. Quick nod out to Bay Area Baller, who has jumped in to say hello. Bay Area, good to see you, my friend. Yeah, it has been I would say, a fairly hectic start to this season, and most of it does center around this quarterback controversy, quarterback conversation, if you will. So before we get into anything else, it's a great transition just to take us right into our first topic here. I really wanted to pick your brain, being one of my foremost subject matter experts here, Jack, with the amount of film that you watch, with the preparation coming into the season. I think that you had one of the firmer grasps on where we were in this quarterback scenario. And now we've watched a full game of film on Trey Lance, so we have 6 quarters of tape on Trey, and certainly it feels as if we know to this point what we're getting out of Jimmy on any given Sunday, and certainly what we're getting out of him this year. So my question really is, now that we have a more complete picture of Trey's development and where Jimmy is in 2021, from what you've seen so far, Jack, between the two quarterbacks now, who would you start going forward? Who should the 49ers start, assuming everyone's healthy?
Yeah, and I really think this depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to make the playoffs this season, then that's going to give you one name. If your goal is to build this out and really focusing on 2022 and beyond, that's a different player. And so, it just depends. If you want to try to make the playoffs and you're going to make a push this year, I think you go with Garoppolo. I understand the issues that everybody has with that, but he is more consistent. There's more consistency in the game that he brings than what Trey Lance does. Although Trey Lance is going to be more exciting, he's going to give you some bigger splash plays. He's going to make some plays with his feet. There's plays that are being missed through the passing game with him that I think don't get missed with Garoppolo.
Do you see the same types of errors from the two? Is that sort of a wash between Jimmy and Trey? Trey, obviously, with the fact that he's young, he's a rookie, he makes the rookie errors, and Jimmy, with the idea of that's sort of who he is. In his makeup, the wires will get crossed at some point, and you'll see something that leaves you scratching your head, wondering what occurred on that play.
I think with Garoppolo, sometimes he just gets ahead of himself, kind of expecting somebody to be in a position or not be there. And so that's why he throws those balls that get intercepted by a linebacker or a safety that's stepping down in the box, because he's expecting that to be open. And he gets rid of the ball so quick that sometimes he's not really, and it's a mistake on his part where he's not checking before he throws it, if that makes sense. You kind of see him doing that at times. And with Lance, you kind of get the opposite with Lance. You get a quarterback who has things that are open, but he doesn't see it as open, so he doesn't make throws. He doesn't throw. He doesn't make. He's a little hesitant to make those tight window throws that Garoppolo is going to make at times. I think that's maybe the best way to put that. And plus, they're complete opposites of each other in the fact that Lance doesn't want to work over the middle of the field. He doesn't like working that in that area because there's so much traffic. So he's much more likely to throw outside the numbers to that area of the field, whereas Garoppolo is the opposite. He's much more comfortable working over the middle than he is to the outside, and it's an arm strength issue with Garoppolo. If he had Lance's arm, I think you'd see him hit all areas of the field more consistently.
Which of those two scenarios do you find more limiting for the 49ers offense? So in other words, when Jimmy is in and you're focused primarily on the middle of the field and short passing game versus Lance coming in, how do you see that limiting what the 49ers like to do, what they want to do, and what they can do with each of those quarterbacks in there?
I think it's more. I think that they can get more done now with Garoppolo, and hopefully they can get more done with Lance moving forward. I think the issue that you have with Lance, and I understand the get him out there, let him play. He's going to get better as he plays. I don't see it that way. I just think there's so much change that's going on for him coming in his rookie year that if he sits this year, plays what he's already played, and he takes that and starts to kind of build on it through practice and whatnot, when he comes back next year, you're going to see a guy who's been able to work on some of his mechanical issues again, but he's not going to be going through the whole process of learning the offense and learning the NFL next season. I think that's why they had this plan of him really not being the starter this year and just kind of using him in bits and pieces.
So you see the experience that he's gotten to this point being valuable enough that even if he were to sit the remainder of the season, he has enough things to work on to advance next season if he were to take over the starting role then?
Yeah, I do. Well, the thing is, the mistakes that we saw from him on Sunday against Arizona 2 weeks ago were the same mistakes that we've seen of him throughout training camp and throughout the preseason. They're similar issues, and they're also similar to what we saw of him on film in college. They're very similar things. He hasn't really, he hasn't taken a next step when it comes to that, be an NFL quarterback. I guess
progression, into that NFL quarterback. And I've heard you go through these a time or two before, but just quickly, in looking at some of those issues that as you say, trace back to what you saw when you were there in training camp, trace back to the film that you watched of Trey coming out of North Dakota State. What are a couple of those biggest elements that you continue to see in his game that he really has to continue to work on at this point?
Yeah, I think it's really being able to see receivers coming open behind guys, if that makes sense. So like
interesting.
So like for example, when they're running a seam route and they have a linebacker that's sitting underneath it, being able to realize that guy's actually open and he can get the ball there instead of point it down, because that's something that we saw him not do on Sunday, and we saw him do it a couple of times in the preseason as well. I saw that a lot from him at North Dakota State. He really needs to see it. He really needs to see it open more often than where he should be.
Not NFL open, where it's a significantly smaller window to be open in the NFL versus open in college.
Yeah, and that's kind of also an up and down thing, because there are plays that he's made that he made on Sunday that aren't guys that are wide open, but he makes the throw, like the throw to Brandon Ayuk on the second and 25. He's not open, but he puts the ball in the right spot. I mean, he's open in that there's an area that he can get the ball to him, and he sticks it in there to him. Same thing on the other first down throw to Ayuk, where it's on the out route on the left side of the field. He puts that in a position where only Ayuk can make that catch. Those are really good throws on his part and tight balls. But at the same time, those are throws where if you go and you look at the way that play is progressing, there's nobody really down the field. There's not a whole lot of options for him to throw to.
Right.
And in those, so he's gunning in there hoping for the best. And I think if he had other options, he probably doesn't go with those throws.
Were you at all surprised to see that the shot to Benjamin was over the middle and not toward the perimeter, in the case that if he were to miss high as he did, that it would lead to an interception?
The shot to Benjamin, which one are we? Oh, we're talking about early in the game.
The interception, correct.
Yeah, I don't. That's a standard route, and that Shanahan really likes to run, is that deep curl. That one they're pairing it with. It's a shot play where they're they got the deep curl with the wheel route, so they're trying to get the deep route on the wheel on the outside, and if not, you come back to the curl. And he had the curl wide open early, didn't see it, and then kind of climbs the pocket, and it opens up more for him, and he hits it.
And sails a bit on that.
Tries to hit it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you
Yeah.
see that as more of a mechanics issue? I mean, when you see a throw like that versus the throw to Ayuk on the left side, where it was such a beautiful ball, it was placed so well. Do you just see that as mechanical issues that Trey will have to clean up in the offseason?
It is. Yeah, because everything about that play, and I said it when I was talking with Grant during our film review, everything, and I've said it on Twitter and stuff a couple of times, but everything about that play was perfect from Lance. It was all what you want to see. He gets to the top of his drop, he doesn't panic and just take off running as he climbs the pocket. He's keeping his eyes downfield, and that movement that he brings getting to the line of scrimmage is really what opens up the linebackers to make that an easier throw. And then instead, it's a mechanical issue that he just doesn't. He pushes the ball. His arm's too low, and it's just the only way the ball can go is up because of where his arm is. He's just not consistent. His issue right now, his biggest issue with his accuracy, is that his arm positioning is not consistent.
And that makes sense. I mean, everyone always talks about with rookies who are correcting mechanical issues, that anytime there is duress on the field, the tendency is to regress a bit and go back to what they're comfortable doing. And so if it's a new mechanic, if it's a new motion for them under stress, under pressure in the game, that they can regress a bit. So I suppose it's not too strange that we're seeing it from him. It's not unpredictable that we're seeing it from him. One would expect to see that from a rookie quarterback. So you're saying that if we were looking toward the playoffs, that the 49ers should start Jimmy G. If we get to a point where we're looking at most likely missing those playoffs, you think it's time to shift and get to the progression of Trey Lance?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm kind of already there in a way. I went into this season not feeling like this was going to be a Super Bowl team, regardless of who the quarterback was. I mean, I felt like they could have a good season, but and be better than they've been. But I didn't feel like they were going to be a Super Bowl team. So in a lot of ways, I was kind of like, go ahead and just. You can see that that Garoppolo is better in certain areas, but just go ahead and go with the rookie that you're expecting to be the long term. Guy, you just made all
right.
you made this huge investment in him, so go ahead and just go with him. He's going to get there. It's just a matter of I think we need to maybe just tap the brakes a little bit and let him kind of work on it.
Whoa there. Whoa. Time to hold up. Yeah. If we go with Jimmy and pursue the playoffs, as I think it's turning out at the moment, certainly for the time being, do you see them working Lance into the system closer to what was happening early in the season, or do you see it being fully Jimmy's ship?
I really think they need to make it just Jimmy's ship. I think if that's what they're going to do, they need to sit Lance, and they need to make this all about Garoppolo, and they need to gear everything they do and focused around Garoppolo. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we're seeing the 49ers offense struggle the way that they've struggled this year, is that they've been kind of playing this game where they're Garoppolo is going to be the starter, but we were building some stuff for Lance over here. So we're going to focus on Garoppolo, but we're also going to spend time on these plays that nobody's going to run other than Trey. And I think that takes away from your overall preparation. I actually wrote about that today as part of my piece, because I think this whole issue, everything they're dealing with, and from the quarterback perspective, is really the biggest mistake that they've made this offseason.
I would agree with that. It really has bitten them. They seem to have made the wrong move at every turn. Looking into the comments here, James had a quick question here for you, Jack. Wouldn't you say that these missed checkdowns are easily fixable by watching tape during a bye week?
Yes and no, and the only reason I say no is because the missed checkdowns that we saw from Lance are the same missed checkdowns that we saw from him during the first 2 weeks of the preseason, and so there's been time since those for him to fix it, and we didn't see it. And a couple of them I don't really know what he's doing, because they both look like they're supposed to be underneath screen throws that he isn't looking at the guy that's the screen receiver.
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on there is key to me. The idea that this is not new, that this is what we have seen from Lance. This is what he's been working on since coming to the 49ers. And clearly he just hasn't reached a level of comfort there yet. A couple of other comments to throw on the screen here. Just got to throw out, this is a great duo. Yes, it is Doe 49ers Big Mac. Yes, it is indeed. And James also noticed that I haven't taken off my Navarro Bowman jersey for a while in these shows. I am trying to change up the mojo of the 49ers single-handedly. And in doing so, it is required that I wear the Bowman jersey that I have on. So I have upped the amount of gear I'm wearing. By the end of the season, you will see nothing but 49er gear in the picture. That's all it'll be at
That's
that
all.
point.
We won't even see you, right?
Yes. It'll just be my voice. Some people may be thrilled at that change, but it will require more and more gear as I attempt to uncover the butterfly effect of my positivity here in Portland reaching the 49ers down in Santa Clara. That's a tall task, but I'm up for it, Jack. I'm up for it. Okay, so I think that I know the answer to this next question that we have here, but it's a natural transition from going about who should start going forward to asking the question, which quarterback will start going forward? In your mind, is it clear who the 49ers front office and their coaching staff feel gives them the best chance to win going forward? Because clearly they are still in win now mode.
Yeah, I think it's always been Garoppolo. And that's what they've said from day one. I know we didn't look at it that way, and everybody, really, most of us were thinking that there was some kind of a competition that Lance had an opportunity to beat him out. But I think they were really always kind of focusing on Garoppolo, and it was going to have to take something big from Lance to beat him out. So, I expect that it's going to be Garoppolo this week against Indianapolis, and we'll see how long he can play. It just depends on whether or not they're winning games. I think if they get back to where they're losing, and like you said, they fall out of the playoff race, which could happen probably within the next 6 weeks, then I think you adjust and change gears and start focusing for next year.
Yeah, agreed. Mathematically, unfortunately, it will take a long time before the 49ers are mathematically eliminated from this year's playoffs with the new format. But I think we will know sooner rather than later whether this team is for real and has any chance at making the playoffs there. For me, I certainly look at this and wonder if we need to be in a situation where you're continuing to get the reps for Trey, even though you've gone back to Jimmy, because it feels, and the 49ers have acknowledged this in how many attempts they've made to address the quarterback room, it feels inevitable that we would have gotten to a point where Jimmy would be injured and we would need to go to our second quarterback. Sure enough, that's the reality of what happened. And it felt as if the 49ers, in their preparations for trying to give Jimmy all of the first team reps, or at least a vast majority of them, failed in preparing Trey to be that adequate backup quarterback, as he was not able to come in and win a game. And maybe I'm being a bit too critical since it was the Arizona Cardinals he had to play against. But do you see the 49ers as having failed a bit in properly preparing Trey for that inevitable situation where he would need to fill in for an injured Jimmy?
Yeah, this is something that I keep hearing, and I'm struggling with it. And the reason I say I struggle with it is because during training camp, they split reps evenly. It was 3 reps for Garoppolo, 3 reps for Lance, 1 or 2 reps for the third guy, 3 reps, and it was the same. It was that way all the way through. The only time that changed in practice is when they went to situational periods where it was like a move the ball period. And then it depended on if the quarterback got the job done. If the quarterback did his job, they'd move the ball, they'd continue to keep running plays, and then, that, and so on and so forth.
Interesting.
And that's where the amount of snaps split up. And a part of the problem with Lance was that he wasn't doing very well in those periods, particularly when they put the ball on, say, like the 30 or 40 and have to go down the field. If it was in the red zone, that was different because you're already close there. But in those periods where they're trying to move the ball, not just working on, say, second down plays or first down plays where the ball doesn't move at all, right, where it's pretty much just within that, to get a first down area, that's when they were usually splitting reps evenly. But when it started becoming to move the ball, that's where you saw the two separate. And there were times when, Garoppolo would just take more plays to get down the field to score, but he'd do it because that's the way that Garoppolo runs the offense.
That makes more sense. A bit more plotting of an offense with the short passes.
Right. And whereas with Lance, they might score as well, but it was, incompletion, 1 yard gain, 12-yard completion, incompletion, 13-yard completion, those kind of things. It was much more of a stop and start, just like we saw on Sunday, quite frankly, last Sunday. It was that kind of an offense during training camp as well. So that's the only reason. And then when you get to the preseason games, Lance got much more reps in the games. than Garoppolo did.
That's
Garoppolo
true. More snaps.
Garoppolo only played a little bit, and then in every game they gave Lance an opportunity to come in and play with the starters. So against Kansas City, it was one series for Garoppolo, one series, two series for Lance, because the first series was a 3 and out, the next series was a touchdown throw, right? And then against same thing against Los Angeles, the Chargers, it was a series for Garoppolo, and then Lance came in, and then Lance played the rest of the game, and he struggled early on with the starters and so on and so forth. So there was a lot of, I think if you add up all of their preseason reps along with their, you kind of really look at it, I think they gave him as many opportunities as they could without making him the starter, really.
Right.
Because you've got to get if you're not planning on him being the starter, you need to get your starter ready for the season. And I felt like I'd never been there before, so I don't know what it was like in previous years when it was Mullins as the second teamer, but it just seems like it was pretty evenly spread out to me, and it was more of the quarterbacks taking advantage of the opportunities.
So the opportunity was there, and it played out basically the way that it should, based on the results that each player was able to get.
Yeah.
Well, that certainly puts it in a different light. There is a lot of blame to go around, certainly anytime there are losses. But if you look at it in that light, it's not quite as fair to criticize the 49ers for not getting those additional reps to Trey, unless you were asking them to forego this season and focus only on the development of Trey Lance. And that's clearly not an acceptable course of action for a team as talented as the 49ers. Do you find it to be, not to sidetrack us here, but do you find it to be a flawed course of action, the way in which the 49ers attempted to do two things this year? Was it fundamentally flawed from the outset?
Yeah, because there's only so much time that you have with your players, and if you're installing things that only one person is going to run, that means that you're spending who knows how much of that time is. Let's say you've got an hour, and it's going to take you 10 minutes to work on this one play. That means that you're taking up a sixth of your time on something that only one person's going to run, where everybody else is just kind of sitting in the room. And I don't understand the offensive line is going to have to do it and so on and so forth, but you're spending a lot of time on something that's going to be only used a couple of times, and it doesn't really make sense. And based off of what we saw of the 49ers offense, in Arizona, if that's the expectation for this team moving forward when Trey Lance becomes your starter, yeah, because that's not the 49er offense. It's everything. It's everything that you really don't want to see. Really, that was a bad plan. I don't understand that plan at all. What their thinking was going into it, other than Shanahan, he has his new toy, and he's got this 11-man football mentality, and it's going to open up all these options for us, and we're going to be able to run through them because now we've got an extra blocker and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And meanwhile, you've got a quarterback running the ball who doesn't run the ball like a running back. Even though he had some nice runs in college, it's not the same in the NFL.
It most definitely is not. And we saw that play out on the field. It certainly looked to be a questionable game plan, and it left me wondering whether it was just a poor decision on Shanahan's part to attack the Cardinals in that fashion, or whether he really was limited by the percentage of the playbook he felt comfortable running with Trey Lance. And I suppose without really getting into Shanahan's head, we can't know the answer to that. But
what's real quick to interrupt you, the funny thing about that though is when you look at that game, there's not a whole lot that they did that's different than what they would do from a passing game standpoint. I mean, there's not a whole lot that they called that you wouldn't expect to see with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, for example, the interception, that's a Jimmy Garoppolo play. Turn your back, you've got the curl, you've got the wheel, you hit, he's going to hit the curl most likely because he doesn't usually throw down the sidelines unless it's, so that's a Jimmy Garoppolo play. There were other routes throughout the game where there were very similar, like Jimmy Garoppolo things. And I'm talking about those checkdowns where you've got a hold on one of them and a sack on the other. Those are Jimmy Garoppolo gimmies that we call Jimmy gimmies, where it's just a quick, easy throw to Kyle Juszczyk running an in route with everybody blocking down the field. You get the ball to Juszczyk, you let him gain 5 yards for you. And then they tried to do it from the other side with Deebo Samuel. And one time it's a One time it's a sack, and the other time it's a hold because he doesn't throw the ball.
The holding penalties were so painful to watch. All right, so do you think, I mean, it seems that Kyle Shanahan agrees with you, Jack, that Jimmy gives us the best chance going forward. He's been very ardent about saying that Jimmy is the starter so long as he is healthy. Do you see, very quickly, anything that can happen in the next 2 games before the trade deadline that changes that to where the 49ers attempt to move on from Garoppolo and trade him before the deadline?
Yeah, if a team's going to give him overpay for him, I think they might look into that. The hard part is that Garoppolo contract is so big that I don't know if there's a team out there, like, say, for example, Cleveland, who has some issues with Baker Mayfield. I don't know do they have $24 million to almost $25 million under the cap that they can make that trade and bring Garoppolo in to replace him? Or would Garoppolo be willing to, take more money to knock down his cap number and push money out and all that kind of stuff? Would Cleveland want to do that? Probably not, considering they have Baker Mayfield and he's the guy that they expect to be the future of their franchise.
Right. I have to admit, as soon as Baker went down and it looked pretty brutal on that injury, I began formulating a tweet about, will Cleveland be willing to pay for Jimmy Garoppolo? And by the time I finished wording the tweet exactly how I wanted it, Baker was walking out of the blue tent, and it appeared that it wasn't quite as serious as it initially had seemed. And who knows, he may not miss a heck of a lot of time with that dislocated shoulder. But that felt like an ideal scenario where you have a team that has legitimate playoffs / Super Bowl aspirations this year and then is derailed by an injury to their quarterback. That does seem like an ideal situation. I would agree that the only likely scenario is where the 49ers do feel they're being overpaid for Jimmy's services and are able to then get some compensation back in the form of draft picks. Well, so it looks like we're going to have Jimmy G going into this weekend. He appears to be healthy, as do the Colts and Carson Wentz. So, Jack, how do you see the matchup unfolding against the Indianapolis Colts this weekend? Is that a favorable one for the 49ers?
I think this is going to be an interesting game because I believe that I haven't been following Indianapolis enough, but I believe that Quentin Nelson's been out a little bit. Their left guard. He's supposed to be returning. So, that's a plus on their side if he's
Big
out
time.
there. Yeah, and I think the Colts might be just teams go through phases throughout the year. They kind of go through ups and downs, and I think that maybe they're getting into a part now where they're a little healthier. They're kind of getting their feet underneath them a little bit. Carson Wentz, remember, beat the 49ers a year ago.
Right.
And so, with a team that probably isn't even as good as Indianapolis. So it's, this is a game that having seen what we've seen of the 49ers the last 4 weeks, I don't look at any matchup and say this is a matchup for the 49ers that they're going to win. I think there's things that you can point to that are favorable. But I think that it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be interesting to see how DeForest Buckner steps up playing at home. Coming back.
A revenge game for Buck. That is going to be tough to watch. I was saying earlier that I probably will need a box of tissues for the tears that I shed thinking about what Buckner could have been doing on our defensive line. It does seem as if Indianapolis, much like the 49ers, because of injuries, because of inconsistent play, have gone from a team that most pundits, most media folks viewed as a legitimate threat within the AFC, very much like the 49ers within the NFC, to where expectations were reasonably high. There have been some injuries and things that you can point to that would explain a bit of the struggles that have occurred. But even with those solid reasons in tow, you would still say to this point have underperformed for the amount of talent that's on the team. And so it sets up as one of those unknown matchups. I've not gone through specifically to look at where I think the 49ers will win the matchup and where I think the Colts will. But Jack, just high level, what do you see as the strengths for that Colts team coming in?
I think you look at their running game has been pretty consistent. They've been,
Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, they've been pretty consistent in their running game. They've been, over 100 yards for, as a team throughout. On defense, they kind of struggle a little bit over there. But, you go through and you look at Indianapolis and you look at who they've played against and who they've lost to. They lost to the Rams. The Rams are a team that I think everybody would agree is better than the 49ers.
Yes.
They lost
Sadly.
they lost to the Seahawks, and the Seahawks we've seen the Seahawks come in and beat the 49ers.
Yep.
In a game that maybe the 49ers probably could have won, so you maybe give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt on that one. And they lost to the Baltimore Ravens, and Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo. There's not a quarterback it's in this 49er building that's even close to what Baltimore puts out there.
Forget about it, Baltimore. Goodness gracious.
Right. So they've been able to, and then they blew out Houston this last week. So I think they're a team at 2-4 that's maybe a little underrated from folks, because they look at the record, they see some of the issues that they've had there, and just kind of chalk this up as a game the 49ers should win. And quite frankly, if the 49ers are a playoff team, they should. But that's kind of where we are right now.
That's a great point. That's the type of game that you absolutely have to win, are those ones that you look on the schedule and they're against inconsistent teams. If you want to be a consistent team in the NFL, you must beat the inconsistent ones. When you look at what Indianapolis was able to do on Sunday against Houston, do you find that to be more of a reflection upon an Indianapolis team that is regaining their strength and catching their stride just in time for the 49ers to have to play them, or an inferior opponent in Houston, or a bit of both?
No, I think they've gotten better over the last few weeks. They started off with those two losses to the NFC West teams, and then they're 2-2 in their last four going against AFC teams. It's win loss, loss win. But I think they've kind of found themselves a little bit there, and I do expect this to be I don't think the 49ers are going to get blown out. I don't think the 49ers are going to blow them out. I think this is going to be a game that it's going to come down to, probably somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 points, and the team that makes the fewer mistakes is going to be the one that comes out as the winner.
Admittedly, I never like to see an NFL player get injured. That is obviously, from a human aspect, just not something I ever want to witness or ever really want to never celebrate. But it was a bit of a sigh of relief for me with the Paris Campbell injury, as I'm confusing two names now, aren't I? But Paris, the wide receiver for the Colts, it really felt to me as if the wide receivers there did in fact match up well against the defensive backs, and may have been able to get over the top of the 49ers defense, and that we'd be primarily in a too high safety look going against the matchup there. Do you see that now as breaking the 49ers way, or do you think that they'll still have trouble with Carson Wentz attacking them over the top?
It's going to be interesting. They still have Michael Pittman. He's their best receiver. So that's kind of where it starts with them, is it with Pittman, and then they have Pascal, who's their next. So, and I'm not sure. I have to go through it and look and see where these guys are right now as far as their health and things like that. But those are their top two. So from a game planning standpoint, I think it's the difficult part with this one is because you have that running back that can really pound you. If the 49ers have struggled with playing their two deep safeties and playing the run, that's kind of been one of their Achilles heels at times this season. So it's going to be kind of an interesting to watch how they try to match this up with them. We saw them play really well though last week against a really good quarterback, a little bit different type of an offense and running game in Arizona. We saw them do a really good job against Seattle as well, with kind of shutting that down, especially early on. So it's one of those games where I think they're gonna have to. There's going to be a little bit of a balancing act between running that too deep safe look that they do, and imagine, and then put in an extra guy in the box to slow Taylor down, because I think Taylor is going to be the one that really sets this whole matchup up for Indianapolis. Yeah. And I just did confirm Paris Campbell. I did not have a brain seizure up there that eliminated that name. Yeah. He had the 51-yard reception for a touchdown. And in previous years, I know he had been a potential breakout star that just can't seem to stay healthy. And I feel for the guy. And obviously you have
a threat there coming up in T.Y. Hilton and Michael Pittman Jr. Obviously, that is going to be a tough matchup there for the 49ers. Do you think that the game plan coming in will be aimed, though, at primarily stopping Jonathan Taylor with that as the primary focus for the defense?
I think in some ways what you're going to see from the 49ers, what we've seen from them so far is they're going to in a game like this, they're going to kind of give you the ability to run the ball because most teams just don't stick with it in the NFL. Most teams will run it a little bit, but they really are trying to get everything set up for the pass. So I think what you probably see is the 49ers give up a lot of yards on the ground in the middle of the field. We talked about this, I think, after the Eagles game, where they, because that's what they did in that game. You're just going to see them give up a lot of yards in the middle of the field, but they're going to tighten it up in the red zone area. I think that we're going to kind of see them get back to that type of a plan this week against Indianapolis, just because of the way that they run the ball. It's one of those things. I don't think they're going to be able to shut down Taylor all day long.
That makes sense. Just a prediction from you here, Jack. Do you think that Wentz will have time to throw on Sunday, or will he be under pretty constant duress?
I think he'll be okay. I think he's going to have some pressure. It's going to be, but Bosa's been playing really well this year. The 49ers really need to get something from the middle of their defensive line, though,
to get that interior pass rush.
Yeah, because right now it's pretty much Nick Bosa and maybe somebody else cleaning it up every once in a while. But they're not getting consistent rush up the middle from anybody. That's why they miss. That's why they miss DeForest Buckner so much.
Yeah, that is painful to watch, and unfortunately, we will witness him on the other side of the ball on Sunday. All right, well, looking forward, assuming that we can pull off a victory on Sunday, or even if we can't, are the 49ers still in playoff contention? Is it still fair to expect of this team that they will make the playoffs at the end of the season?
If you asked me to bet on this, I'm going to say that the 49ers won't be a playoff team. The 49ers, since 1972 was the last time the 49ers started off 2-3 and made the playoffs.
Ooh, that's a long time, Jack. That's a real long time.
The closest they've come to that, where they've been late, under 500 and still made the playoffs, was 1985. They were 3-2 though. They got to 3-2, lost back-to-back weeks, and fell to 3-4, and then were able to rally back and get to 10-6 at the end of the season. And they were the last wild card team that season. They were the fifth wild card.
Ooh, that's rough. Yeah, when I look at it, it seems to me that you have a couple of locks, if you can call them locks, this early in the season. But it sure does feel like you have Arizona and the Rams both pretty well poised to make it to the playoffs, one of them taking the West. Tampa Bay seems, barring some catastrophic failure, to be capable of taking the South, the Packers in the North, the Cowboys in the East. And so it leaves the 49ers fighting for two remaining wild card playoff spots with the likes of New Orleans, Minnesota, Chicago, Carolina, Atlanta, Washington, Philly, and Seattle. I mean, it is a jam-packed logjam of teams right there in the thick of it that seem capable. But the one common theme that I see to all those teams is that they are all on some level inconsistent. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's those last teams in are going to be your inconsistent teams that are up and down, and they're going to, it's kind of whoever gets hot or gets, does good against the other ones. The 49ers are lucky in that they're lucky and they're not lucky. They're unlucky in that 3 of their losses already are in the NFC, 2 of them in their division. But they're lucky in the fact that they get to play Washington or Seattle again. They get to play Minnesota. They get to play Atlanta. They get to play some of those teams that you mentioned. And so those games are going to be big if they're still in the hunt, right? Because that's where they can kind of get tiebreaker advantages and things like that to the end of the season. Because I think it's really going to come down to that. Can the 49ers get to 10 wins? I think that's what it's going to take to make the playoffs.
Eric is not overly optimistic here. Eric says, I'd say about 30% chance the 49ers make the playoffs. I'm a bit closer to a coin flip here at this point, but I'm with you in that if I'm betting on this, if I'm putting money on the line, I believe I'm leaning away from betting on the 49ers making the playoffs. I went through and I look at, of those incomplete teams that are there right now, just my gut feeling, I see Minnesota and Carolina as the most complete teams and the most capable of putting together a series of wins that put them in contention for those final two wildcard playoff spots. And I see the 49ers right there in that mix. I see the 49ers, depending on how this thing shakes out, being very close to it. But I went through the remaining schedule and figured, well, I'll be generous and I'll give the 49ers a split in the remaining division games. So regardless of how they're able to come away with the 2 wins, giving them 2 victories out of the 2 remaining games against the Rams and the single games remaining against the Seahawks and the Cardinals. I think I had it broken out as them beating the Seahawks, losing to the Cardinals, unfortunately, and then splitting with the Rams based on home or away. And then I started to go through and look at the other matchups, a quick and dirty prediction, if you will, but Colts at home should be winnable. At the Bears against a rookie quarterback, even though it's a long journey across the U.S., I still think that's a winnable game. Come back home, drop the one to the Cardinals, win one at home against the Rams. Go out to Jacksonville. Gotta hope that they can pick up a W there, but it's an early start. It's a long road trip. Those are the types of games that can be dropped. Yep. I had it as a W. Vikings at home, I had them dropping it. At the Seahawks, a W. At the Bengals, a W. Falcons at home, a W. At the Titans, a loss. Texans at home, a win. And then I've got the decider coming down to at the Rams in LA at the end of the season, with a win either putting the 49ers at 11-6 or a loss putting them at 10-7. I unfortunately, when I went through and did this exercise, put a loss against the Rams there, and that put them at 10-7. And so I think that I land with you that the most likely scenario as it stands at this moment is being right there on the cusp, and 10 wins probably not being enough unless you have some tiebreakers to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and I think, you look at some of those games, like the Bengals game, when we looked at that at the beginning of the season, that was chalked up as a win. The Bengals are playing much better than anybody expected. You look at what the Bengals did to Detroit, for example, is very similar to what the 49ers did to Detroit, right? And so how much different are they? The Bengals already beat Minnesota, and Minnesota's a team that I think you just said the 49ers are going to lose to, right? And they
Yes.
beat Minnesota earlier this season. So, that's one. The Jacksonville game, I think the 49ers can still win that, but what's tough about that one is they're playing on Monday night at home before they travel all the way out to Florida. And that's kind of a
brutal.
tough ask. And the NFL is doing that to a bunch of teams this year. It's not just the 49ers that have had that kind of turnaround. So it's going to be, that's a game, I don't think Jacksonville is a very good team. Crazy stuff happens when you have, in the middle, that part of the season, who knows what the 49ers health situation will be at that point.
Well, you're not the only one that feels that the Bengals game could be close. We've got James, Keneal, and Eric all on that. Why in the world do you think that Bengals? And believe me, this isn't one where I thought it would be an instant W. It was just one as I went through. I found both the matchup against the Vikings and the Bengals to be too close to call at this moment. So I did the basic coin flip. They'd win one, they'd lose the other. And so that is, to me, those will be games you need to keep your eye on going forward. What became very clear in this exercise for me is the margin of error for the San Francisco 49ers at this point in time in the season, only going into week 7, is next to nothing. I mean, they cannot, week 6, they cannot afford week 7. God, I keep messing myself up here, Jack. Yes, it was week 6 during the bye. I just can't imagine them being afforded the luxury of dropping any of these games that could be close.
No, they can't. They've got the games that you look at that where you feel like they have the advantage. They need to absolutely win those games. So that's the Jaguars, and there's a couple of them in there that I think that you can absolutely say that the 49ers have the advantage on. But it's really tough when you look at the schedule. You look at what they've done so far. I know it's easy to say, well, look what they've done against the Arizona, how good they played there. But then you look and you say, okay, well, look what they did when they were against Philadelphia. And that's a different situation because it's early in the season. Home opener for Philadelphia. Philadelphia in that first half still has one of their better defensive players who got hurt in that game and was lost for the season and things like that. So that's not the same team anymore that the 49ers faced. But I'm just not really high on this team at this point, based off of what we've seen of them from from really a preparation standpoint. They just continually make the same errors week in and week out.
A real lack of consistency that is maddening, absolutely maddening. A couple of questions here coming in the comments. A quick one here from Bryant saying, Rob and Jack, why do you think the 49ers actually play better on the road at the moment? Just pointing out that the last win at Levi's Stadium was 365 days ago. It was October 18th of 2020 against the Rams. 49ers taking that one 24-16. Obviously, they finished out the season with home games in Arizona. It was a weird year for most of us, but do you think that there's something to the 49ers being better prepared for these road games?
I don't know. I'm an old guy, so I'm gonna say I think it's just because they've got the curse of Candlestick Park on them.
Oh, it's a painful curse to have because that was such a sweet dump.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's funny. I spent a lot of time over the weekend. It was my son had a game, and Pop Warner game up in the Bay Area, and it was in Oakland. And I started looking back. I remember there was a big fire back in 1991 in the Oakland Hills, and I remember seeing that from Candlestick Park, and so that kind of got me down a rabbit hole. It took me down memory lane with Candlestick Park again.
Man, oh. I have a lot of memories from that place. Absolutely a lot of. When I go through and I list the number of games that I was fortunate to be at, just because of the time in space that me and my father ended up at games in Candlestick and how good the 49ers were during those years, it's ridiculous the number of fantastic games and unforgettable moments that I was able to be a part of there at Candlestick, and it makes me sad that it's gone. But
yeah. No, I pretty much grew up there. I mean, my brother and I had season tickets from 85 till 2002. Oof. And so it's 49er games. I was at the Stick in 1982 when Joe Morgan hit the home run to knock the Dodgers out of the playoffs.
Beautiful.
Stuff like that. So there's just way too many memories of that place. And it's like you said, it was a dump, but it was the 49ers dump, or it was our dump. And as nice as Levi's is, the Candlestick Park was a great place to watch a ball game.
It was our dump. Well, we're about to head into a rapid fire segment where I throw some questions at you and get your take. But one more from the crowd here. Keneal wants to know, Rob, does the record prediction change based on whether we start Trey or Jimmy? So you didn't do a formal record prediction, but when you look going forward, do you see fewer losses or more losses when you switch out Jimmy for Trey?
I would go with more losses. I think the 49ers are 1-4 at this point of the season. If Trey Lance had started week 1, I think they still beat Detroit. The 49ers are just so much better than Detroit was. But I don't think they would have beaten Philadelphia.
That's fair. I mean, it was close. When you look at the games that were certainly winnable, and I think that we've got some comments that talk about how close these games were. Going to this one here by Gizmo, where he says, we almost beat the Packers. Why is everyone giving up? I mean, first and foremost, I definitely am not giving up. And I'm with Bryant on this statement that we can still make the playoffs, and that as fans, we've got to be in that supportive, ease up a bit method. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think the point that Jack and I are getting to is you have reached that point where you just can't afford any more mistakes. And this team appears to be one that to this point is inconsistent in what they do and making a considerable number of mistakes. And therefore you have to wonder if they're capable of running out the rest of the season without making those same mistakes that to this point they seem to make consistently.
Yeah, I like the fact, what he says there, that they did almost beat the Packers. And that's, the Packers are one of the better teams, and they lost to the Packers though because they made too many mistakes throughout the game, and that goes back to the inconsistency piece that we're kind of talking about there, right? Yeah. And that's why they lost that game. Or let's just turn that around for a minute. That's just where are we right now? If they win that game, what happens if the defense holds at the end of that game? This whole narrative that we have around the quarterbacks is different. If it's a completely different conversation about the Green Bay game, if the defense holds it on that last series of the game instead of giving up the field goal.
Jimmy's a hero, right? I mean, it's a last-second comeback victory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that's anytime you have a come from behind win, whether it's Joe Montana, Jimmy Garoppolo, not trying to put those two in the same, saying that they're the same player, but I'm just talking about quarterbacks. I'm taking two quarterbacks on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Right.
You need the defense to hold up their end of the bargain. Joe Montana doesn't have these comebacks. He doesn't win this. He doesn't defeat the Dallas Cowboys if it's not for Eric Wright. Even after the catch to Dwight Clark,
People gloss over the defensive holds that have to happen after those epic offensive touchdowns.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, so we're headed into our rapid fire segment here, which is basically intended to be me picking the enormous brain of our favorite resident 49ers expert, Jack Hammer here. And so I'm going to go through one by one, and we're just looking for your sort of instant reaction to these off-the-cuff questions that we have. So is quarterback the difference? We've talked about the idea that these games have been ridiculously close, and that the 3 games we lost were all winnable. Has quarterback play been the difference in the 49ers' losses?
Quarterback play has been an issue, but I think the bigger issue with this team has been the offensive line and the play up front. It's really been, I think, an issue for them with being with them being unable to really get their running game going and be consistent with it, especially in the first 3 weeks of the season. They've been pretty good the last 2 against Arizona and Seattle, but those are also 2 of the worst running defenses in the league. But I think their offensive line is a bigger issue than people think it is.
Yeah, it feels as if from the center on over to the right tackle, it just goes from average to terrible in what we've seen on the field. It leaves me wondering what we have there and whether it will coalesce at some point and come together, or whether we see sloppy offensive line play for the remainder of this season on the right side.
Yes, no, I'm with you there. And then on top of that, you have the receiving core who has been non-existent, really, outside of Deebo Samuel. The receivers have been not good. They're not getting the ball they're not even trying to get the ball to Brandon Ayuk. Right now, through the first 5 games, Deebo Samuel's on pace to get 176 targets this year, which would tie Jerry Rice, who for I think the most in team history. He had 176 in a 16-game season in 1995. And you look at that number, we're 52 for him right now, and the next closest isn't even at 20 when it comes to the wide receivers. I think it's 16. So, you've got one guy getting 4 times the amount of targets as everybody else. And on top of that, the receivers are dropping balls at a rate of over 10%. So it's a difficult situation. And Samuel is one of those guys. He has 6 drops and 52 targets.
Man, it has been a rough season so far for everyone not named Deebo Samuel, and in the drops department, even Deebo. That is tough.
Yeah.
All right. So I think that we can say that, yes, quarterback play has in fact contributed to where the 49ers are, but no, definitively, it is not the sole reason for where they are, even though fans and what they seem to talk about on a weekly basis might make it seem that way.
Correct.
We've got a couple of players potentially returning to the 49ers this week. I believe that we have K'Wan Williams has returned to practice, and they have opened the window for JaMycal Hasty. The quick question here, looking for the rapid response, is, does the return of JaMycal Hasty mean anything for the 49ers offense?
I think it does. I think he helps out their short passing game. He helps out Garoppolo or Lance, either one of those two. He's a better receiving threat underneath than the other the rookies that they have right now.
And he is also a trusted running back when it comes to being in on third downs, right? To this point, with the 2 rookies, they've been using juice pretty much exclusively on third down. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. The only issue that you have with Hasty is he does have an issue with putting the ball on the ground. So that's the only concern that you have with him, is he does have, and you saw that against Philadelphia, and you saw once that happened against Philadelphia, it was pretty much out of the game until they didn't have anybody, they ran out of running backs.
Oof. Yeah, things get bleak, and then all of a sudden fumbling issues don't matter quite as much. Come on back. We can do this.
Exactly.
All right, that's JaMycal Hasty. What about any of the other rookies? Do you see any additional playing time for any of the rookies coming out of the bye week? They have an extra week of preparation. You think that this may be the time where one of them can take that next step Do you see any additional reps for any of those first 4 draft picks or any of the rookies in general?
I don't really see any additional playing time for any of those guys. Aaron Banks would be the one that you would think of maybe, stepping in a right guard because of the issues that they've had there. But I don't really see them making that move. I mean, I haven't been at practice though either to say one way or another. We just don't get to see that anymore as far as their actual, what they're doing, and going against each other and where those issues are for him. We don't get to see that part of the game anymore.
Typically, you would be there and you'd be able to see that happening, right? You'd be able to form your own opinion on it. But that's because of the changes that have taken place and the lack of access that we have this year.
Well, it's in general. It's always been that way. They shut out once they start. You're there for stretching an individual period, but once they go to the team period, you don't get to watch that, and they don't do one-on-one drills and things like that during this portion of the season. It's not, the offense and defensive linemen aren't going against each other until they get to team.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the next question, because Trent Williams said today that it doesn't matter. We have enough talent in the building already, so they don't need any rookie reinforcements. His quote was, "Our list of wrongs is not that long. It's nothing we can't handle. We're not waiting for somebody to walk through the door. We got all the talent we need in-house." In your opinion, Jack, is he right? Do the 49ers have the talent in-house that they need to be serious playoff contenders?
Well, the answer to this is they either have enough talent and they're underperforming, which falls back on the coach, or they don't have enough talent. Period. Because a lot of times if you're an extremely talented team, you can have a couple of mistakes and you're still going to win games because you're just more talented. I think they have enough talent to be competitive. I don't know if they have what it takes to win games because they just keep making the same mistakes. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It does. I hope that they have the talent in the building. When I looked at this team in the preseason and I looked at the roster top to bottom, I was reasonably convinced that this was a talented enough team to be as competitive as I expected them to be coming into this season, which was to compete for the playoffs and be a legitimate Super Bowl contender. The 2 key season-ending injuries certainly tapered my expectations a bit, tempered them, but I still believe the 49ers are a very talented team. It's tough for me to watch the inconsistent play from week to week. I hope that we watch it click at some point, because I have a feeling that if we don't, things could begin to unravel within the organization. They have set themselves up with enough of a locker room divide type of situation that if this season goes off the rails any further, it feels like it could get ugly to me.
I agree. That's this team. And I have an article that's coming out all about this whole quarterback situation. And if this thing starts to go bad, I think you're going to see a fractured locker room, because you have a group of guys already who I think are Jimmy Garoppolo guys and guys that are Trey Lance guys. And if this thing goes south and they're out of it, you're going to see those. I don't know if you're going to really hear it outside, but you're going to just see it more and more in the way that they're playing.
Right. You'll be able to see it in the player interviews. You'll be able to see it in the dynamic of the team. Yeah, that makes sense. It is such a shame that we don't have that locker room access, because I would kill to have you in there asking those questions directly to the players as we get to that point. I just hope that once we get past this whole nightmare of the way in which things have changed, that reporters are let back in the building. It's tough to imagine, but not hard to imagine at the same time, that the NFL might want to restrict that access, but it would be such a loss for us as the fans, because it is so impossible to get the temperature of the locker room without being in the locker room.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
So another sort of question around the inconsistency that we're seeing on the field, and just a couple more quick ones here before we get you out of here, trying to get you out close on time. But when you look at Shanahan's offense, do you think that some of the reason we continue to see all of these penalties, all of this sloppy play, and all of this inconsistency on the field, and the idea that a quarterback or a center or a core player needs a full year to grasp the system, do you believe that Shanahan's system is too complicated and that he needs to dial it back a bit?
If that's what's causing the problems, is that the offense is too complicated, then yeah, it needs to be fixed, because the NFL isn't a league anymore where you have guys for long periods of time. A lot of times
Right.
you're it's almost like it's even less than college now, because in college you have guys for 3 or 4 years in general, and in the NFL it seems like you're always having to turn over a certain amount of your roster. So let's just say the offensive side of the ball, you lose one starter or two starters a season. That's, what is that? Over 10%, 11, 12, 15% of your offense that
right.
it's working themselves up to speed at any given time. That's not going to work. So if it's too complicated and it takes guys a couple of years, we're kind of in an endless cycle where I don't think the 49ers are ever going to be good under Shanahan. I mean, if that's the case,
right?
Because they don't have Matt Ryan to bail him out.
No, and it is an offense that stems from his father at a point in time where you had considerably more time to spend with players, considerably more time to spend on practice reps, considerably more time to implement offensive systems. And so it seems to me, while something we cannot draw any clear conclusions on at this point, it seems like something that warrants us to keep our eyes on it going forward. All right, last one here for you, Jack, before we let you go, is around the idea that it's tough to beat out Brunskill. This comes from John Lynch's interview that he had with Matt Mayoko. And I'm paraphrasing to some extent, but I believe these are pretty close to the actual words that John said in the interview. He said he's hard to beat out. He does enough to get through a game, which is not a glowing... and then he goes on to say, well, he does more than just enough to get through a game, right? Like he sees what he said, he hears himself say it. He's like, oh shit, that was wrong. Like, let's walk that one back a little bit. But it was a Freudian slip in my mind, because that's all Brunskill has been doing to this point, is enough to get through the game, but not enough to get through the game really well. So my question is, do you believe that Brunskill is playing at a level right now where it's actually tough to get past him? Or is this more of a statement around where Aaron Banks must be in his progression, since he cannot beat out Brunskill playing the way Brunskill is currently playing?
Yeah, that's the first time when you brought that up to me before we got on. That was the first time I'd heard that. And the first thing that popped in my head of that statement from Lynch was the old Kyle Shanahan statement from back in 2018, when the 49ers didn't address the defensive end position in the draft. And he was asked about, why didn't you do that? And he said, well, it's pretty hard for a rookie just to come in here and beat out Cassius Marsh. I think it's pretty much that same thing with Daniel Brunskill. It's pretty tough to beat out Daniel Brunskill, but we're going to keep trying to find someone to do it because he's not very good. And the deal with Brunskill is I think the issue and the reason why he's still playing is because Aaron Banks isn't ready.
Yeah.
And if he was, he'd be in there instead of Brunskill. I don't think it takes any great leaps to understand that's why that move was made. Brunskill's a guy who nobody knew about, was in the AAF, I think it was called.
Right.
And came in and played pretty decent in 2019 and some spot duty. They went in last year with him expecting him to be their right guard. Really throughout last year, he didn't play well, and the excuse that was given or the reason was because he was bouncing back and forth so much between center and guard that he never really got
didn't have enough time at one position to get comfortable. Yeah,
and now we're seeing him in one position, and we're seeing him get beat, repeatedly, and it's frustrating because he didn't look good throughout training camp. He was getting beat consistently in training camp, and he was getting beat in the same ways that we've seen him get beat in games. He just doesn't hold the edge very well, guys. If they're going to, and it's the same thing with the center. You can just run around either one of those two guys. If the only time they really hold on is if it's a bull rush. If the guy's attacking their inside or outside shoulder and then not getting help, they're going to usually get run by. They're just not able to move quick enough to get over there. And I think the problem with Banks is that he's a guy who spent his entire college career on the left side, and they're trying to transition him to a right guard spot, and that's been rough. Even Sewell from Oregon, who everybody felt was the best offensive lineman in the draft, or one of them, struggled with going from the left side over to the right side early on in Detroit, and then that's why they moved him back, and he played pretty well against Nick Bosa because he's back where where he knows what's going on.
It was remarkable to see that, where you watched him struggle in the preseason and you heard the beat writers in Detroit talk about the struggles he was having. And then all of a sudden you plug him back in on the left side. It didn't look so bad against the 49ers. You have to wonder if that's certainly impeding a little bit of the development from Banks. Do you see this as a situation? I think Bryant's on the right path here, that good teams, great teams have good or great offensive lines. That seems to me to be a relatively true statement within the history of the NFL. Do you see an opportunity for Banks to overtake Brunskill at some point this season?
I think it's going to be tough for him unless Brunskill just gets really bad and they just kind of put him out there to see what he can do, kind of like, towards the second half of the season if they're out of it. It's just really hard to make those moves in the middle of the season because your time in practice is so much more limited than what you get in the preseason. During training camp,
aren't enough reps to go around, Jack.
There really isn't. The changes that the NFL's made in trying to help players out has really diluted the product that we're seeing on the field, because the guys just don't have enough reps to really get better. They pretty much get to the NFL and they stay who they are because there's so much learning that goes on. They're either going to be good because they were good when they got here, or they're going to struggle.
Well, hopefully there's an opportunity for Banks, or Brunskill just starts playing at a level that we don't need Banks to come in. That would be fine by me as well. Well, Jack, I meant to say this at the beginning, but the link to your channel is down below. Anybody that's watching this video, get over there, subscribe to Jack, follow him on Twitter. The Twitter handle is right there below his beautiful face. Go ahead, follow Jack on Twitter, subscribe to him on YouTube, because he puts out fantastic content all the time. I've got myself a little bit of content coming up. Join me this Wednesday, 4 p.m. for a 49ers mailbag. This is going to be an OG mailbag edition, because I have had 49ers mailbag at gmail.com if you want to hit me with a question. I've had that going for a long time, back when I used to do shows with Grant, and I had some OG folks that would hit me with questions, and I'd do a mailbag on my channel. Well, I'm bringing it back, and I'm bringing in the questions from those OG members of the 49ers mailbag. If you have a question you want on the mailbag, put it in the comments on this YouTube video. Hit me at 49ers mailbag at Gmail. Follow me on Twitter. Hit me up there, wherever it's easiest for you. Jack, do you have any shows coming up here? I think you have one going on tonight, don't you?
Yeah, I'll be on my channel at 7 o'clock with Jesse Naylor. We're doing Hammer and Nails early this week. Usually we do that on Thursday night at 6:30. But some other things came up, and so we had to move it forward this week. We were able to fit it in tonight, so we're going to do it tonight at 7 o'clock. So a little off our normal schedule, but jump over there. That's always a fun show between the two of us, and hopefully neither one of us gets angry and storms off the set.
Yes, I love the disagreements that can occur between you and Jesse Naylor on Twitter. There is always a little bit of fire, but underneath it all, it's so clear that there is mutual respect and the idea that you can still communicate even though you're having that disagreement on Twitter. That's a lesson for all you 49ers fans on Twitter, that you can, in fact, respectfully disagree with folks and hold a different opinion. Well, Jack, man, it is always an absolute pleasure to have you on here. You are such an informed guest when it comes to the 49ers. If anyone is listening that doesn't subscribe to the Press Democrat and you go subscribe because of Jack, make sure to let them know that it's only for their 49ers coverage that you are now paying for that subscription, because that's what I do.
It's even better because you can go to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com for free and see the information. So
that's fantastic.
It's one of the few papers that's out there right now that covers the 49ers on a regular basis that isn't behind a paywall.
No paywall.
It's pretty much, I think, Sports Illustrated and the Press Democrat, as far as the ones that have press, people that are there on site. So 49ers.
That's fantastic. I just put out an article on Sports Illustrated this weekend. I'm trying to stay fired up, Jack. My positivity has taken
I liked your
a beating.
article, by the way. It was really good.
Thank you. I had a thrill writing it, and it was, for anyone who hasn't seen it, go watch that video, because I tried to narrate it, and it was just me. It starts negative, and you might think, well, Rob's lost it. He's clearly depressed at this point. It must have turned to wintertime in Portland. But no, it turns around, and I remain faithful. I remain steadfast in my belief that this 49ers team has the talent it needs to be successful this year. They just got to put it all together.
Yep. I see where you're coming from. It's not a, I liked, that's why I liked, you made good points, and I can definitely see, the way that you can spin the season as having a positive ending, because it's there. It's just a matter of, can they put it all together in order to get there?
That is right. All right, 49er faithful. Jack, as I said, thank you for coming on. Always a pleasure. We will see you guys again soon. Go watch Jesse and Jack tonight on Jack's channel. Jack, it was a pleasure, good sir. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's always fun to come on and talk with you.